No idea why I became an actor. I wasn't very bright. So, no, not bright. No.
Katharine Hepburn, the Hollywood legend, a symbol of pride and fierce individuality, unexpectedly revealed a list of 7 lesbian actresses she secretly dated and utterly despised. Hidden love affairs and relationships concealed for decades have now come to light, shaking the entire film industry. Which famous names will appear on this list? And why did Katharine Hepburn harbor such hatred for those who once captured her heart? This never-before-disclosed story is now unveiled, leaving audiences both shocked and breathlessly curious. Born in 1907 in Hartford, Connecticut, Katharine Houghton Hepburn was the daughter of a progressive household. Her mother, Katharine Martha Houghton Hepburn, was a suffragist and ardent advocate for birth control at a time when such views were scandalous, while her father, Dr. Thomas Hepburn, campaigned to raise awareness about venereal disease, a taboo subject in polite society. From the very beginning, young Katharine grew up in an environment that encouraged debate, courage, and a refusal to conform to expectations. It was a crucible that forged her legendary spirit of defiance. Hepburn's early years, however, were not without shadows. At the age of 13, she suffered the devastating loss of her beloved older brother, Tom, who died in what was reported as a tragic accident, but which Hepburn herself would long struggle to understand. The event left her shaken, and for years she withdrew from society, retreating into books, sports, and private reflection. Yet out of this grief, a new resolve began to take shape. Hepburn discovered that performance, whether on stage or in life, could be a form of survival, a way to transmute pain into purpose. After graduating from the prestigious Bryn Mawr College, where she studied history and philosophy, but spent much of her time immersed in campus theater, Hepburn set her sights on acting. It was not an easy path. Her voice was deemed unusual, her manner too brusque, and her presence too commanding for the delicate ingenue roles that dominated Broadway. But Hepburn was undeterred. In 1932, she made her film debut in A Bill of Divorcement, opposite the great John Barrymore. Critics immediately took note. Here was no fragile flower, but a strikingly original screen personality. She was bold, athletic, angular, and brimming with intellectual energy, a sharp departure from the sultry glamour of contemporaries like Greta Garbo or Jean Harlow. Yet Hollywood can be cruel to those who refuse to play by its rules. By the mid-1930s, after a string of box office disappointments, Hepburn was branded with the dreaded label, box office poison. For many actors, such a stigma would have been the end of a career. But Hepburn was nothing if not resilient. In a move that revealed both her shrewdness and her stubborn independence, she returned to the theater, reclaimed her reputation, and plotted a comeback on her own terms. That comeback arrived in spectacular fashion with The Philadelphia Story, 1940, a sophisticated comedy of manners written almost as if tailored for her. Hepburn not only starred in the Broadway production, but also cleverly secured the film rights, ensuring her return to Hollywood would be triumphant. The film was a smash hit, re-establishing her as a bankable star and proving that audiences were ready for strong, witty, and uncompromising women on screen. From that point on, Hepburn's career became a tapestry of daring choices, unforgettable performances, and relentless pursuit of excellence. Over the decades, she amassed 4 Academy Awards for Best Actress, an unparalleled achievement that still stands today. Her performances in films such as Morning Glory, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, The Lion in Winter, and On Golden Pond revealed a remarkable range, from fiery passion to quiet vulnerability. Each role bore the unmistakable stamp of authenticity that defined her craft. Equally legendary was her decades-long partnership, both professional and romantic, with Spencer Tracy. The pair co-starred in 9 films, their on-screen chemistry unmatched in Hollywood history. Off-screen, their relationship was complicated, marked by secrecy and deep devotion, yet it became one of the most enduring love stories in show business lore. Together, they embodied a balance of strength and tenderness that captivated audiences and critics alike. But perhaps Hepburn's greatest role was herself. She wore trousers long before it was fashionable for women to do so, spoke her mind without apology, and lived a fiercely private life, eschewing the trappings of celebrity culture. To generations of fans and aspiring actors, she became more than a performer. She was a symbol of freedom, intellect, and courage. If Katharine Hepburn's professional life was a story of audacity and reinvention, then her personal life was an equally fascinating saga, a blend of romance, secrecy, heartbreak, and a relentless pursuit of independence. Behind the luminous glow of Hollywood marquees, Hepburn lived with a complexity that rivaled the characters she brought to life on screen. Her first foray into love was, in many ways, conventional. In 1928, not long after her graduation from Bryn Mawr, she married Ludlow Ogden Smith, a wealthy Philadelphia businessman who adored her with quiet devotion. But almost as quickly as it began, the marriage unraveled. Hepburn, restless and ambitious, realized that domestic life, dinners at country clubs, polite soirees, the quiet rhythm of suburban comfort, was suffocating. She once confessed, half in jest, that she had married out of curiosity, as though testing whether a traditional life might fit her. It did not. Within a few years, the couple quietly divorced, and Hepburn, characteristically frank, admitted later that she was unsuited to marriage. "I could never take root in the role of wife," she might have mused, had she written her life as a screenplay. What followed were relationships as dramatic and unpredictable as the roles she played. In the mid-1930s, she was linked to the powerful producer Leland Hayward, a man whose charisma matched his professional clout. Friends whispered that he was perhaps the one man who could have anchored her tempestuous spirit. Yet Hepburn resisted permanence. Even as she was drawn to Hayward's energy, she recoiled from the thought of surrendering her independence. She chose freedom, again and again, over convention. Then came Howard Hughes, the enigmatic billionaire, aviator, and inventor who embodied the restless ambition Hepburn recognized in herself. Their relationship has become the stuff of legend. Two icons circling each other like comets, brilliant and volatile. Hughes adored her intellect and her fearlessness. Hepburn admired his audacity and his ability to soar above the ordinary, both literally and figuratively. For a time, the pair seemed destined for something enduring. Imagine them at Hughes's private airfield, Katharine's hair whipping in the wind as he prepared a test flight, while she teased him about his obsession with the sky. But the romance, dazzling as it was, proved unsustainable. Hughes's compulsions and Hepburn's unyielding independence clashed. In the end, neither was willing to compromise, and they drifted apart. Two restless spirits, too untamed to tether to one another. And then there was Spencer Tracy. If Hepburn's earlier loves were fiery chapters, her relationship with Tracy was the novel of her life. A story written in both passion and restraint. They first met in 1941 on the set of Woman of the Year, and the chemistry between them was immediate, electric, undeniable. Hepburn, tall and commanding, seemed to tower over the gruff Irish-American actor with sad, searching eyes. Yet what they discovered in each other was not dominance or surrender, but balance. "You're not afraid of me," Tracy reportedly told her after their first scene together. "No," she replied with a sly smile. "I respect you too much to be afraid." Their romance, however, was complicated by circumstance. Tracy was a married man, devoted to his wife Louise Treadwell, though their union had long been strained. For Hepburn, who despised hypocrisy, the secrecy was painful. She lived much of her love for Tracy in the shadows, careful never to flaunt their bond in public. Hollywood gossip columnists speculated endlessly, but Hepburn maintained a dignified silence. To imagine her in those years is to picture a woman caught between two worlds, the blazing independence that defined her and the quiet, almost self-sacrificial devotion she gave to Tracy. In moments away from the cameras, they found a kind of sanctuary. It is said that Hepburn would retreat to Tracy's modest bungalow on the MGM lot, where the two would cook simple meals, laugh over crossword puzzles, and talk deep into the night. Hepburn, who had lived much of her life at full speed, discovered in Tracy a stillness she craved. "He was a mountain," she once said, "and I was a leaf." Theirs was not a romance of roses and candlelight, but of mutual understanding. A partnership marked by patience, humor, and an unspoken bond that lasted for 26 years, until Tracy's death in 1967. one could imagine an alternate life in which Hepburn and Tracy had married, lived openly, and built a family together. But Hepburn, ever pragmatic, accepted the impossibility of such a life. She once remarked that she couldn't interfere with Tracy's obligations. Instead, she chose the role of companion, confidant, and caretaker, roles she played with the same passion she brought to her art. As the golden chapters of her career turned into twilight, Katharine Hepburn entered the final act of her life with the same defiance and dignity that had defined her on screen. The fierce vitality that once propelled her across tennis courts, up mountainsides, and into the whirlwind of Hollywood eventually bowed, as it must, to the inevitabilities of age. Yet, even as her health waned, Hepburn seemed unwilling to grant illness the power of victory. Instead, she met frailty as she had met every challenge before it. Head held high, with humor, candor, and a refusal to indulge in self-pity. In the 1990s, the world watched as Hepburn's public appearances grew rare. Her once commanding stride slowed, her voice, still sharp and unmistakable, grew softer, sometimes quivering. She suffered from bouts of pneumonia and the visible tremors of a neurological disorder that caused her head to shake, a condition she accepted without shame. "I shake," she once said plainly. "So what?" Life is to be lived, not hidden. It was a declaration of resilience, a message to those who might have expected her to retreat from view. Hepburn never allowed weakness to define her. Friends and neighbors in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, where she had long kept her beloved waterfront home, recall a woman who continued to stroll along the shore, wrapped in scarves against the wind, stopping occasionally to chat with locals or to watch the boats drift across the Sound. Imagine her, seated in a wicker chair by the water's edge, a book balanced on her lap, pausing to gaze at the horizon as though searching for the next adventure, even when adventures had become memories. In quieter moments, she would entertain visitors with stories from her past, often downplaying her triumphs and embellishing small, humorous details instead. To one friend, she joked that her 4 Oscars were a bit of clutter, once threatening to use them as doorstops. To another, she confessed she sometimes wondered whether her best performance had not been on screen, but in navigating the contradictions of her own life. There was an honesty in these exchanges, unguarded, playful, tinged with a wisdom only time could bring. Her health, however, grew steadily worse. She endured a surgery in the 1990s to remove a tumor from her neck, her recovery slow and painful. Yet Hepburn insisted on carrying herself with independence. She refused the idea of full-time nurses for as long as possible, preferring instead to rely on close family members who rotated through her home to care for her. "Don't fuss over me," she would quip, brushing off concerns with a wave of her hand. But behind the humor was a woman who understood her body was betraying her, even as her spirit remained unbroken. Some who visited during those years described a striking image. Hepburn sitting in her living room, sunlight pouring in through wide windows, the walls adorned with mementos of her career, photographs with Tracy, playbills from her stage triumphs, letters from admirers. On a nearby shelf sat a row of dog-eared books, the company she most cherished. It was as though she had created a private theater, a museum of a life fully lived, where she could wander through memory without regret. If there were regrets, Hepburn rarely admitted them. Yet one might imagine that in those quiet hours, she sometimes thought of Spencer Tracy, whose presence, even in absence, still lingered like a steady shadow. Friends whispered that she often spoke to him aloud, as though continuing a decades-long conversation no death could interrupt. "Spence," she might murmur while gazing at the flickering light of a candle. "Can you believe we made it this far?" Such imagined dialogues were never melodramatic but intimate, the private musings of a woman who had always balanced love and solitude with remarkable grace. As the summer of 2003 approached, it became clear that her time was drawing near. Hepburn, true to form, approached death as she had approached life, without fear, without pomp. She reportedly told her family not to arrange any grand farewells, no public spectacle. "No fuss," she insisted. "Just let me go." On June 29th, in her home in Old Saybrook, surrounded by family and the quiet rhythm of the water outside, Katharine Hepburn slipped away at the age of 96. Her passing was striking in its simplicity. There was no Hollywood extravagance, no cameras flashing at a cathedral, no lavish funeral filled with stars. Instead, the announcement was made plainly. A legend had left the stage. And yet, the world reacted with an outpouring of reverence. Newspapers across the globe carried her image on their front pages, while tributes poured in from generations of actors, directors, and admirers who credited her with changing not just the film industry, but the very idea of what a woman could be. Even in death, Katharine Hepburn remained as enigmatic as she had been in life. The tributes poured in, praising her boldness, her independence, her trailblazing career. Yet, behind the marble statue of Hollywood's Iron Lady, whispers lingered. Rumors of a private life more intricate, more daring, and perhaps more scandalous than even her closest admirers ever imagined. In biographies, memoirs, and the recollections of those who circled her inner orbit, one story has surfaced time and again: the alleged existence of a list. Not just any list, but what some claimed was Hepburn's private catalog of 7 women. 7 actresses and artists with whom she was rumored to have shared intimate relationships. According to speculation, the list was a mixture of admiration, passion, disappointment, and in some cases, bitterness. If true, it would challenge the carefully constructed image Hepburn left behind, adding yet another layer to her already complex legacy. The names said to be on this secret ledger read like a roll call of Hollywood royalty, women whose fame rivaled Hepburn's own. Each relationship, whether fleeting or profound, seemed to represent a different chapter in her restless search for connection. Tallulah Bankhead was the first name that surfaced, and perhaps the least surprising. Known for her volcanic personality and her appetite for danger, Bankhead was a storm in human form. Hepburn and Bankhead, according to whispered accounts, collided like fire and gasoline, an irresistible attraction, followed by inevitable combustion. Imagine them, sparring over martinis at a smoky nightclub in the 1930s, their laughter filling the air one moment, their tempers flaring the next. Friends recalled that their encounters were as exhilarating as they were exhausting. Hepburn, disciplined and proud, reportedly grew weary of Bankhead's reckless abandon, but could never quite erase the thrill she had felt in those early days. Barbara Stanwyck represented something different. A mirror. Both women were fiercely independent, sharp-tongued, and allergic to sentimentality. Their rumored affair was brief, yet Hepburn is said to have described Stanwyck, perhaps in a private letter never meant for the public, as a reflection of myself without the armor. It was this vulnerability, however, that unsettled Hepburn. She could spar with Bankhead's chaos, but to see herself exposed in Stanwyck's quiet determination was perhaps too close for comfort. Their bond fizzled, leaving behind only respect and a subtle sense of loss. Greta Garbo, the most elusive star of Hollywood's golden age, added an entirely different shade to the list. Garbo, famously private and inscrutable, fascinated Hepburn. Some biographers have suggested that Hepburn pursued her with a mixture of desire and curiosity, drawn to Garbo's silence as much as her beauty. Yet their connection, if it existed, never flourished. Garbo's refusal to engage in public or private intimacy left Hepburn frustrated. "She was a fortress," a confidant recalled Hepburn saying, "and I don't climb walls that don't wish to be scaled." What might have been a profound romance instead ended in disappointment, Hepburn retreating to lick wounds inflicted not by betrayal, but by Garbo's unshakable solitude. Joan Crawford, by contrast, was all heat and spectacle. The two women, who often found themselves cast as rivals in Hollywood gossip, reportedly shared a brief but torrid liaison. It was a collision of egos, a duel wrapped in desire. Some claimed that their affair lasted only a few weeks, undone by Crawford's hunger for dominance and Hepburn's refusal to be conquered. "We tried," Hepburn is imagined to have quipped years later, "but we were both leading ladies and there's only room for one spotlight." Then there was Mercedes D'Acosta, the playwright and poet whose name is inextricably linked to some of the most iconic women of her era, including Garbo and Bankhead. D'Acosta was bold, unashamedly open about her love for women, a stance Hepburn admired but also feared. For someone as protective of her privacy as Hepburn, D'Acosta's candor was dangerous. Their alleged relationship was marked by attraction, but also suspicion, Hepburn keeping the playwright at arm's length lest her secret world be thrust into the harsh glare of publicity. Mercedes wanted fireworks, a friend might have said, but Kate wanted shadows. The inclusion of Judy Holliday, the bubbly blonde best known for her comedic brilliance, startled even Hepburn's closest acquaintances. Their rumored affair was brief, tender, and complicated by the pressures of Holliday's rising career. Hepburn, by then an established titan, reportedly worried that her influence might either shield or overshadow Holliday, and the relationship dissolved quietly, leaving behind only affectionate memories and unanswered questions. Finally, there was Dorothy Arzner, Hollywood's first openly lesbian director and a pioneer behind the camera. Arzner and Hepburn were rumored to have shared not only creative kinship, but also something deeper, something more personal. Unlike the fiery romances with Bankhead or Crawford, this was a relationship of intellect and mutual respect. Arzner, who mentored countless actresses, is said to have provided Hepburn with not just companionship, but perspective. Yet Hepburn, ever wary of labels and the scrutiny they invited, insisted on drawing a line. Their bond remained cloaked in privacy, powerful but unacknowledged. Whether the so-called list was real or merely a patchwork of rumor, speculation, and projection, its existence has fueled endless fascination. Was it Hepburn herself who kept such a record? Or was it the invention of biographers eager to feed Hollywood's hunger for scandal? No document has ever been found, no confession ever made. Yet the whispers endure, perhaps because they resonate with what we already know of Hepburn. A woman who was at once fearless and vulnerable, passionate and private, bold in her choices yet cautious in her disclosures. In a way, the very ambiguity of the list is fitting. Hepburn built a career on defying expectations, on resisting easy categorization. Why should her personal life be any different? Whether true, false, or something in between, the tale of the 7 women only adds to the mythos of a star who was never content to be ordinary. It paints her not as a flawless icon, but as a human being. Complex, contradictory, and endlessly fascinating. And perhaps that is the point. Katharine Hepburn's greatest performance may not have been on screen at all, but in the carefully choreographed balance between revelation and mystery that kept the world enthralled, long after the cameras stopped rolling. Katharine Hepburn left behind an immortal artistic legacy, an unmistakable personality, and a personal life shrouded in mystery. Rumors, lists, secret romances. All these elements only added to the allure of a legend that the public has never stopped being curious about. What do you think about this list of 7 actresses? Is it the truth, or merely fragments of a legend embellished over time? Leave your comments below, hit like, and subscribe to continue uncovering untold secrets from the world of Hollywood stars.